Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Corey Carlson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode. Hey, this is Corey. Today's episode with Ron Kitchens is awesome. You'll get an introduction of him in just a minute. But some of the items we talk about are how he had a breakdown 20 years ago, which caused him to take control of his schedule, of his time, of his commitments. And he shares some habits that you and I can use. He talks about how he applies the Nehemiah verse directly to his life. And it was also informational. He's also working on another book, What It Takes to Stay Great, and he gives some tips along the way. So just packed with all kinds of good bits of wisdom. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. On to today's episode. Hello, this is Corey Carlson. You're listening to Win at Home First podcast. Today is a treat because I'm being joined by Ron Kitchens, and it's one of my favorite books I've read in the last few years called Uniquely You. And we were introduced together because we both used the same writing coach, Chad Allen, for our book. And so I had a conversation with Ron shortly after reading the book and enjoyed it then and looking forward to this podcast. He is the CEO of Birmingham Business Alliance. He is just a kind of a serial entrepreneur. He's done 7 startups. He kind of is always in the social space as well as the business space. He's married as well as just a strong man of faith. So excited to hear from you. And so thank you very much, Ron, for being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks. I'm tickled to death. And, the fandom goes both ways. So both the vulnerability of your book, but also your commitment to make leaders better every day. And I'm so appreciative of that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great. Well, let's dive in, Ron. What is that key trait to win at work and win at home?
I think of understanding your own boundaries of what you're committed to do in every area. For me, I budget my time like I budget my financial resources. So I use an Excel spreadsheet, and quarterly, I'm auditing that Excel spreadsheet. I'm looking at my calendar saying, I committed my time in this way. And my wife and I sit down and talk about it. For us, it's what are we going to do together? How are we going to spend our resources, time, talent, treasure? Mm-hmm. And time's a big part of that. And so if I don't wait till the end of the year, you can get way off track if you wait too long. And a lot of cases, if I'm in a rough season, if I'm feeling bad about where I'm at, if I'm not excited to get up and go to work, or I'm not excited to go home. And I know a lot of men that I've coached, men with, who don't want to leave work because there's nothing at home that excites them as much as that hit of adrenaline they're getting from work or that validation. Then I'm looking at that every 40 days because I know something's off track. And for me, 40 days is important. My own organization runs on a 40-day cycle. It's biblical, but it also makes sense. A monthly is too short sometimes. 2 months too long. 40 days has a great rhythm about it. But if you're not managing your time, then that's where I see a lot of people. Mm-hmm. That's where I see a lot of moral failure. That's where I see a lot of family failure is in that lack of time management.
That's good. In the Excel spreadsheet, what are the buckets of time that you're tracking?
So I track it left to right.
Right.
So first thing I'm investing in is the spirit side. So my morning prayer is the very first thing on that list. Mm-hmm. And I use a system a friend of mine, Bob, kind of created called 2 chairs. So I literally sit down with God and I have a conversation. There's a chair across from me and I'm talking to my friend.
Really?
I'm sharing because sometimes praying, particularly, and I only know my perspective, the perspective of men that I work with, is sometimes it feels either hyper spiritual, like we're trying to copy, Billy Graham or somebody in our prayers, or you're sitting there trying to think of something to pray of. So you start praying for wealth, or you start praying for, something. But for me, I want to have a conversation with God. So I sit down every day in two chairs. He's in one chair and I'm in the other. And I talk about my day. And sometimes I have my calendar out and I'm sharing what I'm worried about or what I'm hoping to happen in that. So prayer is really important. Second thing is committed family time. My commitment was we had dinner together as a family every night. Unless I could not control it, if I was out of town on business or I had something really special, we had dinner every night. And every school function went on my calendar. And everybody on my team saw it. The spelling bee went on my calendar. Every sporting event went on my calendar. Those things got spent first. Mm-hmm. Family vacations got committed to first. Then we started breaking down the commitments I make at work. And I still, to this day, do this, is I have to block time in blocks to do things. So, at 8:05 every morning, my team meets, for a stand-up meeting, and we have specific things we're dealing with each day. On Tuesdays are fully committed to the team, to one-on-one meetings, to management meetings. We're doing that. Wednesdays and Thursdays are about resources and relationships. So we're blocking those out. And we're doing it by hours, not just days, but I'm blocking in hours. And then Friday's about big ideas. So I'm working on that deep thought things. What are those things that are going to bring back resources to the organization? And putting in. And so I'm spending all of my time for the year and blocking that out. And then when I go back and review my calendar, I'm not just saying, how did I feel about it? But how did I meet the expectations that I had a commitment to my wife, to my daughter, to the people I work with, to the people I work for? All know what my commitment is. And now I know whether I met the obligations. And if I didn't, why not?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for the explanation of that. I love that. Do you have in there also for friends?
I do. So there's absolutely time. Church is in there. Mm-hmm. Church has been kind of weird during COVID. Right. How we do that. We've actually, as I go back and reflect, have spent more time in a church service because, frankly, we're watching some really cool, amazing ministers that otherwise I would have not known existed. But now that we can watch stuff on Zoom and get it recorded, we're spending more time in the Word than we did before. But there's also, those family and friend obligations are there. And, those things that, date night is on there. And, I treat it just like I would treat my money. I'm probably I'm more strict with my time than my money. I can replace my money, but when the time's gone, the time's gone. I can't do anything to fix it.
Now, we talk about the 5 capitals in the book where it goes spiritual, then relational, then physical, then intellectual, then financial in that order. And part of that physical capital, because it has more value than financial, because it's really not replaceable. You can't get it back. You can wait, you can get money back as far as just, going and making more money, but you can't go make more time. So, man, that's great. Ron, was there a moment that you had to start managing your time because you were finding yourself spread too thin or not getting things done where you're like, oh my goodness, I got to fix this. I'm going to Excel spreadsheet.
So for me, it was, I had a rock bottom moment that so I was standing on a beach in South Padre Island, Florida. My mother-in-law had rented a house, she wasn't a wealthy woman. This was an important thing for her, had her children and their children all there. And I'm standing on the beach on my cell phone, talking to my office all morning and working on a project that I knew was going to die. I knew it wasn't going to work. And yet I let myself get drawn into that and flew home, left my family on the beach to go do this because I felt more of an obligation to people who were putting pressure on me than I did to my own family. And sitting in my house a day later, all by myself, while all of my family is on vacation, and I couldn't quit crying. I just couldn't. I was just so sad and broken. And I thought, I'm never doing this again. I don't know what's important to me. So I let other people tell me what's important to me. And I'm not going to do this again. My family comes first. And this was nothing but laziness on my part. And I'll never do this again. And so for now, 20 plus years, that's my driving memory. When my calendar's out of whack, it actually says on my Excel spreadsheet up in the top right-hand corner, it just says Padre Island. Because I want to remember, I want to know that pain and know why I'm doing this. This isn't so I make more money. This isn't so I'm more famous. This isn't so I sell more books. This is so I, at the end of the day, remember what's important to me. And of all the gifts God's given me, and I am overflowing with abundance of grace by God. The only thing that somebody else won't replace me at someday is being Lynn's husband and Kelsey's dad. Those are the things that nobody ever replaced me. And, July of this year, we'll be married 30 years. And good Lord willing, we'll have another 30. And but those are two things I'm not giving up, and I'm not I'm not ever losing at home again.
And thanks for sharing that. And it's just a great example, because when you were at Southwest Michigan first before, I'm sure you're giving your all, but you're still doing the time on it because that was within the last 20-year period. So you're still managing well, but that's a perfect example where you were the leader. Things were going great. You'd done some incredible stuff. You were leading a conference where you had all kinds of national known speakers coming in, but yet you don't work there anymore.
Nope.
You are replaceable there.
That's right.
And here you are down in, Alabama at a neat job. But that's a great example where you put, a lot of effort to something and now you're not there.
Yep. And the world moves on, and it's supposed to. A great leader ensures that they're replaceable. I built a great team. They're doing wonderful. Areas of the business that are supposed to be growing are growing. And then I can feel really comfortable pivoting and doing new challenges and taking on new opportunities that before, I just wouldn't have been able to.
Yep, absolutely. And I like how you have the Padre Island on the top of the spreadsheet, kind of like an Ebenezer moment. I mean, there's things I have in my office as reminders of the good that God has done in my life. Well, I was a civil engineer by degree, and so I have the actual professional engineer stamp on my back shelf right behind me, because I want to be reminded of God's provision to get me through it. And looking behind you, no one can see this because it's on Zoom, but you've got your Mandarin oranges.
I do.
Which is a significant story in your life.
It is.
And I love that. And are you still, for new employees, buying Mandarin oranges on their first day and putting it on their desk?
Yep. I have a new assistant that started yesterday, and she had a can of Mandarin oranges on her desk when she started, and she hasn't asked why yet. And I know it'll come, and then we can talk about those things.
Right. And so for you, that's also an example of God's provision.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, in the story of the Mandarin oranges is, I grew up in abject poverty. My mother's 15 years older than I am. My dad's 16. My dad was killed when I was 4, when he was 20 in an industrial accident because he couldn't read. The sign said, "Don't do this." And but if you can't read the sign, it doesn't matter what it says. And it cost him his life. And so I grew up just about as poor as you can grow up in America. Teenage mom, had no relationship with family, either side. And Christmas, I must have been about 6. We get a box of food from a church we didn't attend, to men that we didn't know, drops off there. And I can still smell, when I tell the story, I can still smell the smell of burnt pinto beans because my mom had been saving money. And so we were eating a lot of pinto beans, a lot of, as poor people will do to save money. So there was a little Christmas under the tree. And when that showed up, that Chiquita banana box, big wax, thick box, and had, a turkey in it, stovetop stuffing, and instant mashed potatoes, but it had a can of mandarin oranges. And the truth is, in the 1970s in the Ozark Mountains, whether it was canned or fresh, tropical fruit was rare and special. Mm-hmm. And we probably didn't really know what to do with mandarin oranges. So it became that symbol. Every time we'd get evicted from a house, every time we would move, when you're poor, there's a hierarchy to what you move. You take the paperwork first so you can get in school and get your government assistance. You take the food, and then if there's some room, you take clothes, but there's never toys. There's never books. They would tear the trash bags that you're moving in, or, there's not room in the car where you're sleeping. So, that can of mandarin oranges became my security blanket. It was the thing that said somebody loved me. Somebody cared on those darkest days for my brother and I. So the can, as all cans will do, after a while got bloated, and my mom threw it away. I must have been probably 9 at the time, maybe 10. Mm-hmm. I remember being heartbroken about it and lamenting how could she do this? Because this can, every kitchen we had, even if it was just a shack of a house, that can went there. That was special. And so money was a little better then, and she bought a can to replace it. And I went to put it on the shelf, and she said, don't do that. I want you to put it on your desk. Well, it wasn't much of a desk. It was really a TV tray, but it was what I had. Mm-hmm. So you put it on there and remember what the cost is of a lack of education. You wouldn't have to do that if your dad could have read. And there's been a can of mandarin oranges in every desk, every office I've ever had since that point. And so we give a can out my wife and I have bought tens of thousands of cans of mandarin oranges and given them to food banks or supported food baskets around the country. But every new employee gets a can of mandarin oranges. And we talk about what that story is and what it means. And when I started this job, 2 different employees knew the story and had cans of mandarin oranges on my desk when I arrived. All right, I made it now. The story's come back full circle.
Yeah, good. And so when you tell the story, how does it apply to them? So, it's their story. I mean, it's your story, and I love it. But I would like to hear from you. How are you sharing with them of it, how this applies to you? I mean, are you pulling God into it and God's provision, or how do you share with them?
We're talking about that. And there's a couple of things. One, it's a story that I was embarrassed about, and I know you've got, as you tell, your story to your audiences and the vulnerability of it, I have the same kind of experience that I was terrified that after I had made it and was successful, people would find out how I grew up. They would find out that, when you're poor, as I just said, you don't move with your clothes, or if you do, it's very few. So I figured out that you could go to donation boxes for Goodwill, and they were all in parking lots at shopping centers, and you can crawl inside the donation box and shop. So we wouldn't have clothes. So I grabbed my little brother, and we'd go rummaging around inside of these boxes and get toys and clothes because we didn't have any. Now, I had no idea that was stealing, but that's how we got clothes. Mm-hmm. So I was terrified of finding out about those stories. But I was asked to speak at a 3-day men's retreat called the Walk to Emmaus. And I was challenged to talk about stories about God's provision. And so, we think about that. And I think they probably thought, well, here's this guy who's pretty successful. He's going to talk about all these great things. And I talked about how a can of mandarin oranges from a church we didn't attend, from men who we didn't know, changed my life. And talked about that Goodwill box, and all of a sudden it became everything I had done in the past almost became irrelevant, because now I had an authentic story. I was no longer terrified that, well, if they find out who I really am, they won't like me, or I'll lose it all, or they'll find out I'm some kind of fraud.
Right.
So it's about, one, being incredibly vulnerable to people and saying, you need to know this is who you see. Let me tell you how that got created. You're seeing a highlight reel, not where I came from. And on the other side of it, I was able to share this story at a United Way board meeting where people didn't really know that side of me. And they were going to do away with Christmas boxes because they're like, nobody needs a Christmas box. What are we doing that for? And I'm like, well, clearly here, no one's ever gotten one.
Yeah. Instead, they get Amazon boxes delivered every day.
That's right. Let me tell you what this is like. And they dramatically increased the funding of that and the impact they're having, and understanding it's not just food that you're giving people, it's hope. That box goes beyond just feeding someone, particularly if there's a message of God involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's incredible. So you're just reminding your employees of God's provision in their life and how they may be sitting there with a new job with the Birmingham Business Alliance,
or scared there's a story about poverty, or scared there's a story of a broken home, or scared there's a story of an addiction in their past, or scared. And I'm like, there's nothing you can tell me that I'm going to judge you on. There's nothing in your past that affects my respect for you. All it can do is shows me what you've overcome to get here. And those are the people that I want to be around. If you had an easy pass, you're probably not going to be as committed to our both business and social engagement as somebody who's had to slug it out. Mm-hmm. I want to be around people who understand that, no one does anything alone. And even if you can't see somebody walking next to you, there's somebody next to your side all the time.
Yeah, that's so good. You are very strong in your faith. How do you lead with that at work?
So it's interesting. Having relocated to Alabama from Michigan, it's much easier in Alabama. So,
that is true, yes.
Rarely go to a public meeting, pray over the meal. I wear and I have for 20 plus years, a bracelet called a Fishers of Men bracelet. So it comes from that walk to Emmaus, and people ask about it, and we'll talk about my responsibility that I've worn this for 20 plus years, because it reminds me every day of my responsibility to serve and my faith. So I have lots of openings because of that. People who look me up know that I'm not inhibited by my faith, not perfect. I still cuss too much, but my faith to me at this point is about an opportunity to extend community. At one point, it was an opportunity to be in community. Now it's an opportunity to extend community at a time when people, I actually had someone we interviewed last week. I said, well, tell me about, your friend group. What do you enjoy doing? I said, well, I really have one friend here. All of my other friends are virtual. And
really?
Oh, and this person was a professional, was career-minded seemingly. And I thought, I need to talk about extending community to you, because I think great if you have a hobby that, there are only 25 people in the world who care about this one thing. I get that, but you can't live your life where your friends are virtual. Mm-hmm. And faith is just an important component about being able to live in community. That there's some churches out in the world that are doing such incredible work with small groups. Church of the Highlands here in Birmingham Has more people in their small groups than they have members of their church. So they have people who are in small groups who don't consider themselves to be members. One of their small groups here in Birmingham, we've had a spring with a lot of tornadoes. And you turn on the TV and you see first responders cutting out trees, opening up roads, helping families get out of their house. And you realize the back of their vests say Church of the Highlands on it. And so they have hundreds of trained, fully equipped members who their small group is serving in a tree response group for emergencies. And, I mean, trucks, it looks like a full professional corporate activity, but yet it's men and women who said, here's how we're going to serve in the community. And I frankly think that's the future of faith. And I think that's the future of our world.
Yeah. But you also hit on something so, prevalent to executives, men and women, is the lack of friends. I mean, the lack of community. I mean, I fell in that trap. I was traveling every week and on the weekends trying to be super husband, super dad. And before I knew it, I kind of didn't have a lot of friends. I mean, I had a guy I could call, get a beer with, but I didn't have anyone I was doing life with, accountability and that encouragement. And when I was writing the book, Ron and Chad and I had found this quote that says there is, no one ever talks about Jesus' greatest miracle. And it's that he had 3 close friends in his early 30s. And it's just because it gets hard. And so I too went, got aggressive, say, all right, I got to fix this, put together a small group. And our small group actually just went on a guys trip about a month ago down to Florida. And that is now going to be an annual rhythm because it just filled all of our hearts up, and a lot of laughs and drinks and just good time and deep talks. And really just seeing what's going on in everyone's life. And what's crazy, even about that small group, Ron, we meet every other week. We went down there for a couple uninterrupted days. We learned more about some of the stuff people had going on in their life than we did from the group. So it just goes to show you that there's still a masking that takes place amongst, executives. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I want to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage you, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And then last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much. You mentioned the bracelet you have on, the Padre Island, all happened about 20 years ago. Was that a pivotal moment in your life, just holistically and all around?
It was where I had first achieved real commercial success. Lots of money in the bank, living on a golf course, swimming pool in the backyard, serving on the right boards of directors. And I had no glimpse into that world. Every day was a brand new day. I didn't have a father who I'd seen. I didn't have family that I knew what to do about. So everything is brand new. And it's that kind of classic story. The more you achieve, the more you lose. And it was a point that and my whole life has been about men who have stepped into my life and opened doors, pulled me from the fire, said, you don't know the direction you're going in. I don't even know why I'm telling you this, but here's the lesson you can learn. And that was one of those where a group of men who I'm still close with said, we think you should come over here with us. We think you can learn from us. We want to be in faith with you. And I don't, my life, I think, would have turned out different. I don't think I'd still be married today. I don't think I would be as successful today. I know my faith journey would have been dramatically different if it hadn't have been for people, being in this kind of model of the priesthood of all believers, where you don't have to be anointed to be a minister. You don't have to have a title. You just have the ability and willingness to serve your fellow man.
Yeah.
And if those guys hadn't stepped into my life, I don't know where I'd be today.
Well, it's that belief. The book of Acts is still active today.
Yep. Yes, it is.
So for anyone listening to this podcast and maybe sitting in your shoes at that moment, what were those warning signs? What were those signals that your buddies were seeing that you were doing that like, oh, hold up, you got to stop that, come over here? What was some of that behavior mindset that they just kept seeing and they, thought you were at risk of going down a bad path?
I think it was just this, I didn't have a plan. So it was a bit like, and it's a bad analogy, but it's a bit like an addict. So I was getting more and more addicted to the success, to winning, but doing, turning down, one of the things I love more than anything is to go bird hunting. I love to quail and dove hunt. And all of a sudden I didn't have time for that. And the reason I like it is because it's social, because you're talking while you're doing it, you're cutting up. It's predominantly guys who you have a good laugh. It's short and, you sit down and eat a brisket taco and it's a pretty good day. And I was turning those things down because I was focused on work, because I was focused on a crisis, because I had to do more and more and more. And I wasn't asking anybody for help. Why would I need help? I know what I'm doing. This is all about me. I must have got here on my own, so I have to do it on my own. And I think a lot of us men fall into that trap, and we forget about, accretive returns, that 1 + 1 = 3. And that's right. When you pair with the right people, that's what happens. But we feel like it's all the weight's on our shoulders, so we have to do it by ourselves. And I think that's what they saw. And I'm still in community with that. We're all kind of spread out around the country, but we make a point that we're getting together multiple times a year. We're, torturing each other on birthdays and social media and texting all day long, lots of days. And as you said, being in community is key. And I think men are terrible at it. We just are.
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. And it goes a little bit back to what you just said. We think we can do it on our own.
Yep.
I'll be fine. I don't need any guy friends. I'll be all right. I can handle it. So you got bird hunting on that Excel spreadsheet then, don't you?
I do.
Yes, great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. With your, daughter and growing up in the house, how did you lead with faith? How did you lead the home spiritually from the standpoint of, like the tension I can have in my house is sometimes I overswing. I go too hard. It's like, kids, let's go. Let's pray. Let's do devotion. Let's do this. And then I may overswing and not be super, not pushing a lot because I don't want to scare them away from God. What did you find to be that kind of that winning balance for you as you led Kelsey and through faith and just being a spiritual leader?
Yeah, I think there were things that we made the decision to do that other families probably it doesn't work for them, but because we only had one child and we were slightly older when we had the child. I was twice as old as my mom, which isn't saying much, but
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But so we made a commitment that, things that her friends' families might find weird, like we pray in public at dinner and restaurants. And, for a couple of years, she was like mortified. And we hold hands when we pray. Our family tradition is we hold hands. We are one body of our family. And at some point, middle schoolish, she took over the prayer. And I don't know when it happened, but still to this day, if we're together as a family, if it's just my wife and I lead the prayer. But if it's the three of us, Kelsey leads the prayer.
Wow.
And I don't know how it happened, but we pray at home. We pray in restaurants. There's no weirdness or shame about it. Doesn't matter. She was home a few weeks ago, and we were in a bar that served burgers. And in all that's going on, we just stopped and bowed our heads and prayed. And 3 people came over and said, thank you. Thanks for exhibiting that. Thanks for doing that. And it was like one of those that maybe I was doing it for you. I don't know, but I'm glad it touched you.
Yeah, that's neat.
And so that was important, surrounding ourselves with other families who were on different faith journeys, but we're all people of faith. And there being no judgment about it. If you want to go with them on Sunday to church, rock on. You want to go to our church, rock on. Whatever that looks like, whatever youth group feels great to you, that's where we want you to be. Because, we believe God's in every house, regardless of what the sign on the front of the building says. And so I think that was a part of it. I think, too, the vulnerability, because there's only one child. We also involved Kelsey in our financial decisions. We set up a budget every year for how we're going to give our money away. And so she participated in that and saw how not everything we give our money to is faith-based, but how our faith informed where those dollars went. Mm-hmm. And then she began to lead how part of that money is spent. And she still leads part of that, of how it's spent, and contributes to it. So it's this ownership of our responsibility of not just personal, but our responsibility to give back. And then, I think the other thing is because of my work and relationships, she's been able to meet an incredible number of people who are successful either in the faith world. So we have another number of friends who are, famous Christian writers, speakers, ministers, and see them in their real life. So they're not mythical. They're not Sunday special. They're people who are living an incredible life. And so you see how that informs and incorporates into your own life.
Oh, that's fantastic. Ron, you mentioned a lot of cool God moments through your story. And, part of my story is God saying, hand over your small story for a greater story. And Ron, is there a moment, you shared a few already, but is there just one that you think that really speaks to, God's impact in your life that listeners need to hear about as they're processing their own life?
Yeah, I think, we talked about, the mandarin oranges and how special that was. But, sometimes I take no for an answer when the real answer is not now. And so it was a few years after my dad had died, and we had bounced from house to house, and knock comes on the door of this rental house we're in on this farm outside of town, and say Art House. It was this kind of old farm rental house, and the guy knocking on the door is the landlord. And my mom goes to the door, and he says, so listen, I noticed you don't go to church on Sunday, and I'd like to invite you to come to my church. Well, in my house at that point, prayer was what you did at halftime of a football game. Their Easter was
depending on the score.
Yeah, that's right. Easter was about chocolate bunnies. There just wasn't any God anywhere that you could see. And my mom said, no, thank you. I'm not interested. And he said, how about your sons? And so I have a brother who's 2 years younger. And I think she, to her own credit, said, hey, if they go with her, I can sleep in on Sundays. And so she said, sure. So Francis Countryman, who was this old broken down farmer, bib overalls, drove an old Econoline van, drug my brother and I to church, even after we got evicted from the house that he had. He picked us up wherever we were at and drug us to the Mount Zion Baptist Church for 3 or 4 years, until they had a bus ministry that got us. And it was Francis Countryman who paid for the first brand new shirt I can ever remember owning, a white shirt that I was baptized in. And it was Francis Countryman that was there when I was baptized. And this wasn't a adopt an urchin day at church. This wasn't, he was lonely. He had 5 kids and lots of grandkids. This was somebody who fully bought into living his faith and living in community, and understand that he had an obligation to be an extension of Christ. And I don't know where I would have ended up without Francis Countryman. He was the guy who paid for my brother and I to go to church camp through middle school. You know, it was always kind of there, made sure we understood our Sunday school lessons. And so it reminds me that when I'm extending a faith offering, whatever that looks or feels like, that it may be that the person doesn't have enough knowledge to say yes, like my mom. But it doesn't mean that I shouldn't find an opportunity, look for an opportunity to serve them, or regardless of that comment.
So if you hear no from the first time, circle back, because it may just mean not now, or they don't have the confidence to say yes.
That's right. Yep. And don't know the value of what you're offering.
What do you hear from God right now, Ron?
Patience. That's, we're in a turnaround here on the organization, and it is, I'd say patience. It's really go deep and not wide. So, I'm going back and reflecting on, my life verse is Nehemiah 6:3. And if you know the Nehemiah story.
Yeah. Building a wall can't come down.
That's it. And that's the verse. And I'm really hearing you got to stay on the wall. You got to keep building. It's not time for you to come down right now. Keep building that wall and building it. And then you can enjoy the fruits of the labor. Then you can, talk to people about the safety they now have and the opportunities because of that wall. But if you don't take care of core business right now, then you're never going to be successful doing the really big things that we're going to get done. And that's hard for me because I've done that. I've done that 100 times. That'll take care of itself. Let's go here where it's more fun and exciting. And I can't do that. I got to stay up on the wall now. Yeah,
that's good. So just playing that out a little bit, because I can relate to it. And I know clients and friends can relate to that, but you're on the wall building as a Nehemiah, but you want to come off. Like, why do you want to come off? Like, is there's this thought that it's 80% done, that's good enough, so I want to go over here?
Yeah, because I know where we're going, and I want to get to where we're going, because I can see how exciting and impactful and incredible that's going to be. But if we don't take care of the reason I have to do the turnaround of the organization is because the wall isn't fully built, and because the organization doesn't have all of the tools it needs. And so you've got to do the first things first. And when you've done that a bunch of times as a leader, it's not very exciting or sexy or that, but it's what has to happen if we're going to get to the really cool, great things on the backside.
So on the day-to-day, I myself have to figure out ways to elevate the mindset, stay in the game. And for you, just circling back to that Nehemiah verse, is there anything else that you're needing to do to remind yourself, hey, I got to stay in this lane for this moment?
I'm a metaphorical guy. I need real examples. So
yeah,
I have to move a ladder out of the way every morning to go to work. Every morning I set up a ladder in the garage so that when I go out, I have to move that ladder to get in my car to remind me, stay on the ladder. Don't get drug off into gossip. Don't get drug off into problems that aren't yours. Don't get drug off into things that aren't important. And what important is brick by brick building that wall. And then once that's built, once the foundation, once the fortress is there, then you can do great things from that. But I have to remind myself every day.
So every day you're moving a real ladder, not a visual ladder, a real ladder to move it. How long have you been doing this exercise of a real ladder?
90 days.
Yeah. 90 days.
So I take my briefcase out just before I go to bed. I set up the ladder by my car, throw my briefcase in the car and my gym bag, and then set the ladder up to remind me every day, stay with what's important.
I know your wife loves you, but does she think you're crazy?
She does.
Yeah, well, good. The only reason I ask is because my wife would be, she loves me, but it would be rolling your eyes and like, you don't need to do that. So I just love to hear that.
Yep. To me, it's, you have to build a process. I'm fascinated, and I'm working on a new book about what it takes to stay great. Because I see whether it's a leader that I respect that all of a sudden has this moral failure, right, and they disappear and their family's destroyed and their company, their ministry, whatever's destroyed. You see sports teams, LSU wins the national championship and then the next year they disappear. It happens all the time in sports. It happens in companies. But I'm fascinated, what do the best do to stay great? And, and it's some people that, may not respect them or want to be them or aspire to be them, but, they put together systems that enable them to focus on what's important. And they don't get caught up in the drama that comes with wealth or success or those things. And that's what I aspire to do. So I have to put those things in place that remind me what it takes to stay great.
Oh man, I can't wait for that book. How is it coming? When do you think it'll be published? Where are you at in the manuscript?
Yeah, it's good. The manuscript's about 2/3 done. And I am going to, our good friend Chad will tell me I'm wrong, so I'm not asking him. This will be my 4th book, and this is the first one that I'm going to write completely through because I don't care. It's not about the money and the publisher. I want to write when I want to write. I want to tell the stories that I want to tell that are important and real to me. And I need an editor to make sure because I'm really an author, not a great writer.
Yeah.
But I don't want influence from somebody who doesn't share my vision and passion and whose influence may be on what's marketable. And at this point in my life, I want what's authentic and what's impactful more than I care about what's marketable. Because it's up to God. It'll sell or it won't sell based on 100 things I can't control. The one thing I can control is my relationship with God.
Yeah, a phrase I've been using a lot since 2020 hit me was I control the input, God controls the impact.
That's right. No, it's perfect.
It's just been helping me so much. Are you in a position to share one tip of what it takes to stay great, or are you still keeping that close to the vest for the moment?
I think one of the things it takes to stay great is a willingness to challenge and change your best every day. Every day you've got to look at, I have a great friend, PJ Fleck, who's the head football coach at the University of Minnesota. And PJ actually has a new book coming out. He co-wrote with John Gordon.
Yes.
And so about his faith journey. And so, PJ and I talk a lot about greatness and about his job. And, one of the things that we talked about is the hardest part about being a football coach is every play you've ever called is on videotape. So it used to be, you'd have to call a friend or maybe you could get a few films of that coach. Now, instantaneously, every play he has ever called is up with a click of a computer mouse. And so, you look at somebody like Nick Saban, who has won all these times, and you go, why does he keep winning and keep changing coaches? Why? Because everything that coach has ever done is on videotape. So if he's going to change up how you play against him, he has to change up how he coaches against you. And so we've got to be willing to do that, because whatever our best is out there right now, our competition can copy it instantaneously. The cost of the barrier to entry is so low in today's world that anyone with just a little bit of resources can know everything you know about your business, about what you do, about the tricks of the trade. So what is the strategic advantage is your willingness to change and your willingness to take that change and adapt it to take the organization in a different direction.
It's incredible. I can't wait for the book if that's just one of many pieces.
But it just seems to keep coming back to that no matter.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the smartest. You have to be the one who's most willing to change.
Yeah. Well, when you do your book tour on podcast, let me awesome. Be part of that tour, please.
Oh, you can count on it.
Ron, this was incredible. What's the best way for listeners to get a hold of you?
They can go to Ron at ronkitchens.com, or I'm like Bob Goff, who's a friend who convinced me to put your cell number out in the world so they can call me at 269-217-9831. Text me.
Right.
I can't have too many friends. It's impossible. But you can always go to ronkitchens.com and get me.
That's awesome. Ron, thank you very much for the friendship and for your wisdom today.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. And God bless all of you.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at CoreyMCarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.